Hi, everyone. I'm David Aragona here with Mike Beer, taking a look back at last week's Preakness Stakes. Mike and I are back from Baltimore, but I think the memories of this Preakness are going to stick with us for a while, Mike, because this was not just a really exciting race to watch, but also a captivating performance by the winner, Journalism.
Yeah, when you see, what he had to overcome to actually get it done. And listen, it wasn't a surprise that Journalism won this race. It was a surprise that he was able to recover from the trouble he got into and win the race. We're going to take a look at that a little bit later, but we'll start at the beginning here, David, with, I thought maybe some surprising choices out of the gate in this race. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, you expected the pace to develop with Clever again going forward. You could see he makes that left-hand turn out of the starting gate to sort of get over towards the inside. I was a little surprised that Umberto Rispoli was as aggressive as he was coming out of the starting gate to try to get forward position. I understand you don't want to drop too far back when you're riding a heavy favorite, but it didn't seem necessary because this horse has such a big late kick. He ultimately does settle towards the middle of the pack here, down towards the inside, Mike. But you can see at this point in the race, Clevergan clears to the front, but they're moving up front.
Yeah, they're going a legit clip here. They're not, they're certainly not walking. They're not flying either, David. I just thought it was, sort of an honest pace in this race. I didn't think it was super slow or super fast here. I was a little surprised that Pratt didn't go with goal oriented early in this race. I know he broke inward a little bit. They obviously didn't want to lead with him, though. He was under a big pull down inside early here. They did not want to lead with this horse. And you see, this is a good spot, in my opinion, for Journalism to be. He's off the pace. He's saving ground down inside. He's got really nobody near him. I know that, much has been made that he's sort of ridden along here, but he's never off the bridle, David. I know he's being asked to run along here, but he's not off the bridle here. He is keeping up, and he's doing it pretty easily.
Yeah, he's not a horse that's going to take you there all by himself, but he's the kind of runner that always responds when he's asked. So you
Yeah.
could see here, Rispoli is starting to get after him a little bit, and he's just trying to pick where to go, and he's going to stick to the inside here. And goal-oriented, you mentioned he had been rated in behind horses. He was traveling strongly to this point in the race, and then you could see the trouble occurs here. We're going to take a second look at it in just a bit, and goal-oriented is not allowing Journalism to come through that hole. There really was very little room to maneuver right in there. Clever again was basically finished at that point, but he gets bumped pretty hard to the 3/16 pole. And in all of that melee, Gosker sneaks away to this big lead, Mike. Looks like he's got the race won, but here comes Journalism at the end.
It's amazing the run that this horse put in, because that trouble at the top of the stretch easily could have gotten this horse beat. And I think most horses, it probably would have gotten them beat. It's the way that he finished up so strongly after that trouble and came and got a loose horse. And listen, again, he was a heavy favorite. He was supposed to win this race. But for him to win it like that was quite a remarkable performance.
Yeah, and you can see once again right here as they come into the stretch, there is goal-oriented under Flavien Prat on the outside. He was trying to hold that line to make it tight on Journalism while not crossing a line to commit a foul there. And when horses straighten up for the stretch drive coming off the turn, they're almost always going to take that one extra step inward towards the rail, especially as they change over to that right lead. And it looks like that's what goal-oriented did, as Flavien Prat was trying to keep him straight there. And Journalism got really bounced around between horses. And as we're saying, Mike, it's so rare to see a horse not just get bounced around like that, but to lose as much momentum as he did in that process and then pick himself up, regather his stride, and finish the way he did. I mean, I was looking at some metrics that you can see on Equibase through GMAX of how much he had to slow down and then quicken up his stride length data, where he lost about 2 feet of stride length in that incident and then is able to lengthen his stride to finish with a stride length that was about 2 feet longer than everybody else at the end. And we know that this horse can finish that way. We saw him put in those relentless finishes in the San Felipe and the Santa Anita Derby, but to do it under these adverse circumstances was really impressive.
It really was. I mean, you could see it. I don't know about you, David, but I watched this race from the roof at Pimlico, and you could see it live happen, where you're like, wow, that was unbelievable. And then just the way that he kicked it into gear to come get Gosker, it was impressive live. It was even more impressive when you see it from all the different angles. And how much trouble he was actually in. He's a real good horse. And again, listen, it's the kind of race where in retrospect, maybe you understand what Rispoli was doing there, but you go to the outside on the final turn. And I know maybe you have to go 4 or 5 wide. You win this race anyway, and you win it easily.
Well, yeah, Mike, let's dive into that a little bit more, because there was a lot of talk after the race and some controversy around the tactics used by these two jockeys, Flavien Prat and Umberto Rispoli. And when you're riding a heavy favorite like that, as you were saying, you generally don't want to take those chances. You don't want to be lucky to win. You want to make sure that you're going to get the trip you need to get the job done if you believe you've got the best horse underneath you. And it just didn't seem like it was really necessary to commit to the rail as much as he did. But once he was down in there and traveling so well to come up the inside of goal oriented, he kind of had to go through that hole at the quarter pole. And I wonder what you make of what Flavien Prat did. He probably drifted in half a path to make sure that Rispoli was stuck in that spot. And I'm curious what you made of that incident right there at about the quarter pole.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it was pretty clear that, listen, Pratt, I think, wound up getting the trip that he wanted there. Sitting in behind, that's, when you're riding in behind the pace like that, what you want to do is get out, 3 wide at the top of the stretch and be clear and make your run. And it seemed like that worked for Pratt until he saw that he had Rispoli to his inside. And to me, and you never know, maybe I'm wrong about this, but to me, it was pretty clear that Pratt saw him. And instead of just going out into the clear and getting his run going with goal oriented, he took the chance to put Rispoli in a real tough spot there. And it almost worked for him. It didn't. He wasn't good enough to take advantage of it. But listen, I have no problem with what Pratt did there. Rispoli put himself in a jackpot in that race, and it almost cost him.
Yeah, I completely agree with that assessment. Pratt kind of drifted into the 2.5 path, like he was thinking about going outside of Gosker, and then he drifted back to the 2 path to make sure there was no room for Jounalism to squeeze on through. And Mike, the only strange thing about that happening, because we see situations like that occur at the racetrack all the time, where there's some race riding going on, one jockey puts another in a precarious situation to make sure that they get the better trip than the horse that is stuck on the inside in that pocket. The strange thing was that Rispoli and Jounalism never steadied and committed to going through that hole and making room for themselves. So jockeys rarely take those kinds of risks, and horses that are put in those situations rarely respond and sort of bowl their way through under those tight conditions the way that Jounalism did. So, I mean, just remarkable on both the part of the jockey and the horse in that situation.
That's a really great point. You're right about that. And that's something that I think I first noticed. Obviously it's so hard to know. And, much of the talk going into the Derby was that Jounalism is running these short fields. You don't know how he's going to deal with traffic and trouble. But one of the things that my takeaway, even though he lost the Kentucky Derby, one of my takeaways there was you saw him in the early stages of that Derby when there was a lot of traffic in the first run through the stretch. He wanted a position in that race, and he bowled his way into it. He's a really brave horse and a really strong horse. And this win, again, considering the trouble, this was a remarkable performance.
Well, Mike, he got the job done. Maybe not winning like an even money shot should, but as we take a look at the payouts for this Preakness, he did pay that straight $4 to win. Maybe value on him if you consider that he was so much the best in the race, despite all that trouble getting the job done. But we've talked ad nauseum about how this Preakness gets bet and the long shots don't really go off at the prices they're supposed to, Mike. I guess the surprise horse in this trifecta was the number 9 Gosker, who, in all of the discussion about the incident between Jounalism and goal oriented, I think the performance of Gosker kind of gets lost in that a little bit.
He ran really well in here. I'll throw this question to you, David. Listen, he's so lightly raced. I'm not really trying to, knock Gosker in any way, shape, or form. But here's a question for you. Considering the trip that he got, I know the pace was solid, but I didn't think it was, one of those paces that gets horses beat necessarily. I thought he got a perfect trip in this race. So having 5 at the 8th pole here with all the trouble behind him, really valiant performance or terrible loss?
I thought it was a really valiant performance by a horse that was so inexperienced coming into the race, had never gone this distance before, lacked the seasoning of others. Yes, he got that unencumbered outside run, and from a traffic standpoint, he encountered none of what Jounalism had to overcome to win to be there at the end of this race. But I do think the pace was legitimate, Mike. I mean, we look at where the other pace players finished in this race. Clever again, steady or not, he was going to finish close to last in this race, and other horses who had credentials coming in, like River Thames and American Promise, who were chasing that pace, they were completely empty by the time they got to the quarter pole. So I do want to give Gosker some credit for opening up on the field the way that he did. I mean, it's not like he just lucked into a 5-length lead. He had to do some running and really kick away at the top of the stretch to get there. As for third place finisher Sandman, I mean, you kind of feel a little bad for him when he ranges up on the outside, actually sticks his head in front of Jounalism for a half second as Jounalism is recovering from all that trouble. But as soon as Jounalism finds his stride, he just leaves Sandman in the dust.
Yeah, I mean, don't feel bad for Sandman in here. This is exactly the trip that he wanted. You've already pointed out that the pace was there for him. That's the setup that he wants. clean run into it, all the momentum through the stretch. Not only did Journalism just easily outkick him in this race, despite the trouble, this was not got he didn't get anywhere near Gosger in this race. He was an okay third.
Yeah, and that's why I say it's not like the race was like Oscar was totally coming back to the field at the end, because Sandman had every chance to make up those 5 lengths as well, and he couldn't get close to Oscar at the end of the race. Let's take a look at the past performances of the top 2 finishers from this Preakness, and as you can see here, it was a 98 buyer for Journalism's winning effort in this second leg of the Triple Crown, Mike. And sometimes we get painted as disciples of the speed figures because we work for the Daily Racing Form, and obviously we talk about the buyer speed figures so much, but this is a quintessential example of a speed figure not really doing justice to encapsulating a performance.
Exactly. That's why you got to do more than just look at figures. You got to watch the race in total. All the buyer speed figures doing is factored in the final time of this race compared to how the other races were playing on the track. It does not take into account what Journalism had to overcome. And again, David, we keep talking about it. He was supposed to win this race anyway. If he gets a clean trip into that kind of a pace here and doesn't have all the trouble in the stretch, he wins off in my opinion anyway, wins off very easily in this race, and he gets a much faster figure.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know if he would have had that same closing finish if he hadn't had to slow down a little bit at the quarter pole. But typically, when horses don't encounter trouble like that, they're able to run even faster and maintain their speed better. So I agree. Could he have gotten back to something like a 108 buyer that he earned in the San Felipe if he had a clean outside run in the Preakness? We'll never know, but it does stand to reason that could have been the case. And I know just based on the speed figure trajectory you see in the past performances, it might look like he's gone backwards since earning that huge figure at the start of the season, but it's all about the context, Mike. And this horse has not exactly had ideal trips, not only in this Preakness, but a few times in a row, unlike he had in the San Felipe where it all worked out.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we've seen enough of him now, David. I mean, he seemed like he was, the right one on the way into the Derby, even though he didn't win that race. He ran great in there. He came back. He ran great again in the Preakness. There's no more questioning how good Journalism is. He's really good.
And we also see the PPs of Gosger here. He is very lightly raced coming into this Preakness. It was a big step forward for him from a speed figure standpoint because he had never run higher than numbers in the upper 80s before. But a good performance from him to get a 97 buyer finishing second in this race. That probably is a true number for him because he was not affected by all of that trouble that befell Journalism in this Preakness. And speaking of these two horses, Mike, let's take a look at the possible runners for the Belmont Stakes. And I know that we crave a Triple Crown attempt in this sport, and you consider that the Triple Crown somewhat of a disappointment when you don't get that going on. But I've got to say, in spite of the fact that the Derby winner didn't come back in the Preakness, this Belmont Stakes, if all of these horses shown in this list actually make it to the race, this is going to set up to be one of the more compelling showdowns we've had at the end of a Triple Crown in quite a while.
Yeah, I'd sign up for this field right now. This would be a really good race. And now all we can do now 3 weeks out is just hope that these horses show up there. Obviously you'll get Sovereignty back off of his, really, really strong Derby. Journalism, listen, I know that, his Derby was a tough race. He obviously had another tough race on Saturday. We'll see what his connections decide to do. I'd love to see them, give it a go though, back in the Belmont Stakes for that rematch. Baeza, of course, I feel like he's gonna have a lot of attention coming out of his excellent Derby performance. This is a really solid group we're looking at right here.
Yeah, because Sovereignty got the job done in the Derby, and we talked about how it was a relatively clean race for the Derby, so it was a satisfying result in that sense. But I don't think either of us really came away from that race, Mike, thinking that it was a settled fact that Sovereignty is so much better than Baeza and Journalism. We came away with the idea that these are 3 really good horses, and we're looking forward to seeing the ball face off against each other again. And we could get that chance in the Belmont Stakes. Fingers crossed that these horses all stay healthy between now and then.
Yeah, exactly. That's all you can hope for at this point. Just get everybody there, whoever it is. And listen, I wouldn't hold it against the connections of Journalism if they decided it was maybe one race too many for him. I'd love to see him there. I wouldn't be that terribly disappointed if he didn't make it. But this is a pretty good group we're looking at right here.
It really is. And there is great reward in running in a race like this because if Journalism is able to sweep the last 2 legs of the Triple Crown, that could essentially sew up a championship, which does matter a whole lot to these connections of these 3-year-olds. So that's a look back at last week's Preakness Stakes. Still a lot to look forward to on this Triple Crown 2025 path. And we'll have a lot more coverage of the upcoming race in this sequence, the Belmont Stakes. You want to make sure you like this video, subscribe to the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel. Like I said, we're going to have a lot of coverage leading up to the Belmont Belmont Stakes. Also, all of the stakes action around the Belmont Stakes at Saratoga this year in a few weeks' time. And also, leave us a comment down below. We want to know what you thought of this Preakness Stakes. If you want to weigh in on the controversy between those two jockeys, how you saw things, because I know there are a whole lot of different takes on what happened. So let us know how you feel about last week's Preakness Stakes. Everybody, thanks for watching on the Daily Racing Form YouTube channel.